You may think that cheerleaders are just these frilly, ditzy little girls who jump around a little bit on the mat and that's it, but no. Cheerleading requires a lot of hard work and dedication. Hi, I'm Kirsten Smith, and today we are going to be discussing cheerleading as a microculture. We are going to be discussing various behaviors we typically engage in, the how low context of culture it is, and some of the physical and cultural attributes that come with it that you will definitely need in order to become a cheerleader. One, we are very low context in culture. Like, there's literally nothing interpretative, mainly because it has to be low context. Because one slip up, if you're not communicating your thoughts very well, and the consequences are disastrous for you and the whole team. Like, it is very common for even the slightest mistake to cost you like a broken bone or a snapped neck or something as minor as a sprain. But all in all, the consequences are commonly very severe, and you will go to the hospital if something goes wrong. So, in order to avoid that, we rely very much on verbal and open communication. Some of the things you need in order to be a cheerleader, tying into that, are an open mind and a good set of verbal and listening skills. Because, as I just said, verbal communication is indeed highly important in order to avoid disastrous consequences. You cannot be a cheerleader and not be able to work with others as a team. You also need to be very peppy because, well, for both the cheerleaders and other sports teams you're cheering, you're there to provide emotional support. You can't be mopey. You really can't. And you also need to have your hair up in a ponytail that's almost as high as this one I got right here. I tried to do it, but it's been so long. Uh, I couldn't get it right. Besides, my hair is very stubborn. Anyway, and you would typically have a bow in it that complements your uniform and the team colors that your school has. So for mine, it was blue and gold or both. And you need two sets of uniforms. One would be the one you see all the cheerleaders using all the time in tournaments, like with the typical colors and then the name of their mascot on the chest. And the second one would be for practice, where the team of the name of the team mascot would still be here, but it's not. It's a little bit more casual, like a t-shirt and some shorts. So it's a lot more comfortable and less restrictive to move in. The That's why the cheerleading skirts are so short as well, because a lot of it is done with the legs, especially if you're a base like I was, and I will get to that terminology in a minute. Um, Another thing you need to be is outgoing and confident, and you also can't have too much stress when it comes to performing on a stage, because when you're in a tournament, you typically perform in front of, I don't know, 25,000 people at a time, and it's not a very good situation to be in if you have stage fright. So if you do have a severe case of it, I wouldn't recommend being a cheerleader then. Um, you also need to be very physically fit. You don't necessarily need to be flexible if you're in a Catholic school like I was, because for whatever reason you do if you're in a public school. But yeah, uh, you do need a lot of lower body strength, especially if you're a base. And speaking of that, the terminology we typically use, I will get to. Where a base is basically the people that lift up the flyer, aka the center of attention in the cheerleading period. Like, the triangle they create whenever they do a a pyramid with someone in the back to support them, or even in the front if they have enough team members. Now, the base is the person who bases. There are always two. Are the people who lift the flyer up by the feet, and the flyer is basically the lightest person on the team. They're typically 90 to 100 pounds, a little small and petite. Um, and they're basically the people that are at the very top that are being lifted high up and are in a physical sense in the most danger, because it doesn't require much to get them up there. However, the force required is a little um, like it can be a little life threatening if they crash down uh, severely enough, which is why we have the backs and the fronts, which are basically people that support the flyer from the back and front in order to make sure that they don't severely injure themselves. And it's to the point where they're told, like the bases who lift the flyer up from the ground, that you have to catch the flyer no matter what, even if it means breaking your own bones. So I guess you could say, in a sense, there's some sort of hierarchy in our little establishment here, with the flyers being the most important out of the group. Uh, and the way we communicate with each other verbally is pretty uh, in sync with the music. It's not very interp. It's not up for interpretation. It's basically just some simple verbal cues that anybody could understand at any given point in time, like go, stop, pick her up, put her down, get into position, uh, base, basically stuff like that. And by get into position, I mean like the choreography. Uh, the choreography is basically dancing, and it's position you're in the routine. Now, this is typically dangerous because, well, uh, tournaments are usually performed on springboards or spring mats, which are basically what they sound like, mats that have springs underneath them. And performing on a shaky and rickety surface while trying to perform tasks that require a lot of hand-eye coordination, something you will also need as a cheerleader, is it's not easy to overcome. Like, it can, you can get used to it after some practice, but it'll take a few months. Another thing is behaviors, or more specifically, how we interact with other cheerleading groups. Now, these interactions aren't exactly unfriendly. We don't exactly consider each other enemies. However, you will notice that if you're in a public school, you will compete against other public schools, whereas if you're in a Catholic school like I was, you only compete against Catholic schools, even in international championships. Like the trophies right behind me, like right there, all from Catholic schools. All from Catholic schools. So there's not much interaction with any other outside groups. And your verbal communication is basically restricted to those who share similarities with each other or inside the groups. And we're treated differently from others, but it's not exactly a negative thing. Like, people are just typically in awe, telling us how amazing we are, and we make it look so easy. And it does indeed look easy, but it's really not. You have to do a lot of lifting with the knees and legs and back, and you strain a lot of muscles. You typically strain a lot of muscles. It's a very vigorous exercise that took me a month or two to get used to. Um, uh, as for the way we communicate, uh, various communication patterns, uh, too there's really nothing too out of the ordinary other than the cues I just discussed. We talk typically normally. We just talk about girl stuff in our own time, like, oh, this boy might be cute. This uh, routine might I could use a little help with this routine. Uh, Maybe help me stretching with some stuff. I there's really nothing special about it. Okay, as for some fun facts, cheerleading routines uh, that started in the 1860s in Great Britain, where it was actually male dominated. The first cheerleaders were actually men, which kind of makes sense, honestly. They were typically held in uni. Um, but it, the actual concept of a cheerleading routine didn't start until 1975. So, yeah. The biggest pyramid ever created was with 60 people in China, which, if you're a cheerleader, you know is extremely big because the typical pyramid is anywhere from, I don't know, 5 to 10 people. There are 3.3 million cheerleaders in the US alone, so it's not like we're a very limited culture, not like we're very small either, and pom poms started out as decorations. They weren't always used the way they are now, and to an extent, they're not used for much other than decoration either. Like for most teams, especially mine, it's basically something you use to get people pumped up for the first 30 seconds, and then you just throw them to the side, and that's it. So it's really not all that different now. You might see it in some public public ones more often, but not really. So in conclusion, cheerleading requires a lot of hard work and dedication, and you can't be one without some sort of determination. Thank you for listening, and bye.